Commander Vex Throne adjusted his three-eyed headset with all the enthusiasm of someone preparing for a dental extraction. The Galactic Security Academy's most boring lecture hall buzzed with the sound of 200 alien cadets trying their best to look interested in Human Threat Assessment Protocol 101. Oh, what a thrilling Tuesday this was turning out to be. Attention, future peacekeepers! Vex Thrawn's voice cracked like a whip across the amphitheater. His species, the Korathians, were known for their militaristic precision and their complete inability to understand sarcasm. Perfect combination for a lecture about humans, really. Today, we learn about the most unpredictable, most dangerous species in the known galaxy. A ripple of nervous chittering spread through the crowd. In the third row, a young Zentorian named Kip Mora raised one of her 4 arms tentatively. "Sir, are we talking about the Void Reapers? The ones who eat entire solar systems?" Worse. Vex Thrawn's mandibles clicked ominously. "We're talking about humans." The lecture hall fell silent. Even the air recyclers seemed to hold their breath. Someone in the back row dropped their datapad, and it clattered like thunder in the sudden quiet. "Now, I know what you're thinking," the commander continued, pacing back and forth with the mechanical precision of a metronome. "Humans don't look that threatening. They're small, they have only 2 eyes, and they can't even breathe in most atmospheric compositions. But that, my naive young cadets, is exactly what makes them so terrifyingly dangerous." A holographic display flickered to life behind him, showing what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary human female. Brown hair, brown eyes, approximately 1.65 meters tall, wearing some kind of blue uniform. She looked about as threatening as a domesticated Fluffian pet. "This," Vex Throne announced dramatically, "is what a human looks like. Memorize this face. Study every detail. Because when you encounter one in the field, you'll have approximately 2.7 seconds to determine whether they're going to hug you or destroy your entire battle fleet." In the 47th row, completely unremarkable and blending in perfectly with the crowd of alien cadets, Lieutenant Emma Vasquez tried very hard not to laugh. She'd been undercover at the Academy for 3 months now, thanks to some truly impressive holographic disguises, and the galaxy's apparent inability to actually verify student credentials. Her current appearance, a gangly, green-skinned Tellurian with oversized ears, had passed every security scan so far. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, a human, sitting in a lecture about how to identify humans, taking notes on her own species' supposed threat level. The Intelligence Division was going to love this report. "The first warning sign," Vex Thrawn continued, pointing a clawed finger at the hologram, "is something humans call smiling. Watch the facial expression carefully." The hologram's face shifted into a pleasant smile. Every alien in the room recoiled in horror. Several cadets in the front row actually fell backwards off their seats. Someone screamed. "As you can see," the commander said with satisfaction, "the human is baring its teeth in a clear threat display. This indicates they are preparing to bite, tear, or otherwise consume their target. In human culture, showing teeth means imminent violence." Emma bit the inside of her cheek to keep from snorting. Oh, if only they knew that the hologram was displaying what humans called a customer service smile, probably the least threatening expression in their entire emotional repertoire. "The second warning sign," Vex Throne droned on, "is their eyes. Notice how they focus directly on their target without blinking. This is called making eye contact, and it's how humans establish dominance before an attack." More terrified whispers rippled through the crowd. A crystalloid cadet near the back was frantically scribbling notes with all 6 of his appendages. Furthermore, the commander's voice dropped to an ominous whisper. Humans possess something called intuition. This allows them to predict your actions before you've even decided what those actions will be. They can read micro-expressions, body language, and pheromone changes with supernatural accuracy. Emma raised her disguised hand. Sir? Question? Vex Throne's 3 eyes swiveled toward her like weapon turrets. Yes, Cadet Zilnara. She'd chosen that name randomly from a Tellurian baby book 3 months ago. How exactly does this intuition work? Is it some kind of psychic ability? Excellent question. The commander's mandibles clicked approvingly. Scientists believe it's a combination of evolutionary adaptation and what humans call common sense. They can somehow process thousands of variables simultaneously and reach accurate conclusions with insufficient data. The cadet sitting next to Emma, a nervous Vorthan named Blex Tony, leaned over and whispered, "That sounds absolutely terrifying. How did they even evolve something like that?" Emma shrugged her borrowed shoulders. Maybe they had really dangerous predators on their home planet? Actually, Vex Throne's voice boomed across the hall, having somehow heard their whispered conversation from 50 meters away. That's exactly correct, Cadet Zilnara. Earth, the human homeworld, is what we classify as a Class 12 death world. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Everything on Earth is trying to kill everything else on Earth, he continued cheerfully. The plants are poisonous, the weather is catastrophically violent, and the animals range from mildly homicidal to existential nightmare. Humans didn't just survive on this planet, they thrived. They became the dominant species by outthinking, outfighting, and outlasting literally everything else. Emma had to admit, when he put it like that, humans did sound pretty impressive. She'd never really thought about it from an alien perspective. To someone from a peaceful garden world, where the biggest predator was probably equivalent to a house cat, Earth would seem like something out of a horror story. Now, Vex Throne activated another hologram, this one showing a human in what appeared to be military gear. Let's discuss human warfare tactics. This is where things get truly disturbing. The new hologram showed a human soldier in camouflage, holding some kind of projectile weapon. Humans, the commander said, with the reverence usually reserved for discussing ancient evils, are the only known species to weaponize literally everything. They have weapons that fire metal projectiles using chemical explosions. They have weapons that use focused light beams. They have weapons that manipulate gravity, electromagnetic fields, and quantum mechanics. But that's not the disturbing part. He paused dramatically. The entire lecture hall leaned forward in anticipation. The disturbing part is that they consider all of this basic equipment. When a human says they're lightly armed, they usually mean they're only carrying enough firepower to level a city block. Emma winced. Okay, that one was actually pretty accurate. But wait, Vex Throne raised a clawed hand. It gets worse. Humans don't just use weapons. They become weapons. They have something called martial arts, which is essentially the systematic study of how to turn their own bodies into lethal instruments. A new series of holograms began playing, showing various human combat techniques. The alien cadets watched in horrified fascination as the images demonstrated kicks, punches, throws, and grappling techniques. Notice, the commander pointed out helpfully, how they use their entire body as a weapon system. Hands, feet, elbows, knees, even their heads can be used to inflict damage. A trained human can kill with literally any part of their anatomy. Blex Tony whispered to Emma again, How are they not extinct? If they're all walking weapon systems, shouldn't they have killed each other off by now? Emma considered this. Maybe they learned to cooperate? Wrong! Vex Thrawn's voice boomed again. Apparently, the guy had seriously good hearing. That brings us to the most terrifying aspect of human nature, their pack bonding behavior. The hologram shifted to show images of humans working together in various scenarios. Military units, emergency responders, construction crews, families. Humans, the commander's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried perfectly to every corner of the hall, will form emotional attachments to literally anything. Other humans, animals, plants, inanimate objects, abstract concepts, fictional characters. Once they've decided something belongs to their pack, they will defend it with absolutely no regard for their own survival. Emma felt a warm glow of pride. Humans were pretty awesome when you thought about it. There are documented cases, Vex Thrawn continued, of individual humans taking on entire armies to protect their packmates. There are cases of humans adopting alien children and treating them as their own offspring. There are cases of humans forming emotional bonds with their weapons, their vehicles, even their artificial intelligence systems. A Rigelian cadet raised a tentacle. Sir, that doesn't sound threatening. That sounds almost nice. The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Nice? N-I-C-E. Let me tell you about nice humans, Cadet Velcrex. A nice human once discovered that a group of slavers had captured some children from her colony. This one human, armed with nothing but basic equipment and what she called righteous fury, infiltrated a heavily fortified asteroid base, eliminated 37 guards, disabled their communications, sabotaged their life support, and rescued all 43 captives. The lecture hall was dead silent. When backup arrived 6 hours later, they found the slaver leader tied up with a note pinned to his chest. The note said, "These children are under human protection now. Have a nice day." The entire operation was completed by one human who described her actions as just being neighborly. Emma tried not to grin. She remembered that story. Lieutenant Maria Santos had gotten a commendation for that mission, and it had become required reading at the military academy back on Earth. This, Vex Thrawn gestured to the hologram, is what humans consider normal behavior. They don't see anything unusual about single-handedly dismantling criminal organizations because someone threatened their friends. A new hologram appeared, showing a human in what appeared to be civilian clothing. Now, let's discuss how to identify humans who are pretending to be other species. This is perhaps the most important skill you'll learn in this course, because humans are extremely good at disguise and infiltration. Emma's blood suddenly turned to ice water. Her heart started pounding so hard she was sure every alien in the room could hear it. The first thing to look for, Vex Thrawn began, is behavior patterns that don't match their apparent species. A human pretending to be a Tellurian, for example, might forget that Tellurians are naturally nocturnal and accidentally demonstrate knowledge of diurnal activities. Oh, hell! Emma had been doing exactly that for 3 months. The second thing to watch for is dietary preferences. Humans are omnivores from a high-gravity world. They require significantly more calories than most species, and they can digest things that would be toxic to almost everyone else. Double hell! Emma had been eating 4 times as much as her fellow Tellurians and claiming she had a rare metabolic condition. The third warning sign, the commander continued relentlessly, is their reaction to stress. Most species become paralyzed or flee when faced with extreme danger. Humans become more focused, more determined, and significantly more violent. It's an evolutionary adaptation they call fight or flight, except humans almost always choose fight. Emma was starting to sweat. Or rather, her holographic disguise was starting to show stress indicators that probably didn't match Tellurian physiology. The fourth sign, Vexthron was really getting into his rhythm now, is their tendency to ask too many questions. Humans are naturally curious about everything. They want to understand how things work, why things happen, and what would occur if they changed various parameters. A human spy will often give themselves away by demonstrating knowledge they shouldn't possess, or by asking questions that reveal their thinking about problems from a tactical perspective. Triple hell with a side of damnation. Emma had been asking tactical questions since day one of the course. And finally, the commander's voice rose to a dramatic crescendo. The most reliable way to identify a human is to watch for their reaction when they believe their cover is blown. A human under suspicion will usually do one of two things: either attempt to extract themselves from the situation immediately, or— He paused, and Emma realized with mounting horror that all three of his eyes were looking directly at her. They'll raise their hand and ask a question to deflect attention while they assess their options. The entire lecture hall turned to stare at Emma, whose disguised hand was indeed raised in the air. When had she done that? She didn't remember raising her hand. It had just sort of happened automatically when she felt threatened. The silence stretched on for what felt like geological ages. Emma's mind raced through possible responses. She could try to bluff her way through. She could attempt to escape. She could claim it was all a misunderstanding. Instead, she heard herself saying, "So, hypothetically, if there was a human in this room right now, what would happen?" Vexthron's mandibles spread in what she was learning to recognize as a Carathian smile. "Well, Cadet Zilnara, or should I say, Lieutenant Emma Vasquez of Earth Intelligence Division, that would depend entirely on what the human's intentions were." The holographic disguise flickered and died, revealing Emma's very human, very female, very obviously not Tellurian appearance to 200 shocked alien cadets. Her brown hair fell to her shoulders. Her brown eyes met Vexthron's three-eyed gaze steadily, and her mouth curved in what every alien in the room now recognized as that terrifying human expression called a smile. "Well," Emma said conversationally, standing up and brushing imaginary dust off her borrowed uniform, "this is awkward." The cadet next to her, poor Blex Tony, made a sound like a deflating balloon and fell sideways off his seat. Emma looked around the room at 200 terrified faces, then back at Commander Vexthron, who was still smiling that unsettling Carathian smile. "I don't suppose," she said hopefully. "We could just pretend this never happened, and I could sneak out the back door." Vexthron's mandibles clicked in genuine amusement. "I'm afraid not, Lieutenant. You see, your presence here has just provided the perfect practical demonstration for my next lesson." "Oh?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "And what lesson would that be?" The commander gestured to the terrified cadets surrounding her. "How to survive an encounter with a human who's been discovered." Emma looked around the room again, taking in the mix of terror, fascination, and awe on the faces staring back at her. Then she shrugged. "Well," she said with a grin that made half the room flinch, "this should be interesting." The silence in the lecture hall was so thick you could have cut it with a plasma cutter and served it for dinner. Emma stood there, very human and very exposed, while 200 pairs of alien eyes stared at her with expressions ranging from abject terror to morbid fascination. It was like being the only shark at a goldfish convention. Commander Vex Throne, meanwhile, looked absolutely delighted. His 3 eyes were practically glowing with what Emma was beginning to suspect was the Carathian equivalent of Christmas morning excitement. "Class," he announced with obvious satisfaction, "allow me to present Exhibit A in human deception capabilities. Lieutenant Vasquez here has been attending our academy for 3 months, eating our food, sleeping in our dormitories, and taking notes on our security protocols. And not one of you noticed." A Centaurian cadet near the front row raised a shaky appendage. "Sir, how is that possible?" "The holographic disguise technology alone should have been detectable by our sensors." Emma cleared her throat politely. "Actually, I wasn't using holographic disguise technology." The entire room went even quieter, which Emma hadn't thought was physically possible. "Then how?" Vex Thrawn asked, his mandibles clicking with curiosity rather than threat. "Our enrollment scans showed perfect Tellurian physiology." Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out what looked like a small, innocuous device. "Biological adaptation nanites. Human engineering. We developed them for deep cover operations on worlds with hostile atmospheres. They temporarily alter cellular structure, metabolic processes, even DNA markers." She held up the device, and every alien in the room leaned forward, despite their fear. "The really fun part," Emma continued conversationally, "is that they're completely undetectable by standard medical scanners because they integrate with your existing biology. To all your tests, I really was Tellurian. Well, mostly." A Vorthan cadet in the middle section made a strangled noise. "You? You actually changed your species? That's impossible." "Not impossible," Emma shrugged. "Just really uncomfortable. Do you have any idea how weird it is to have your digestive system reconfigure itself? I couldn't eat chocolate for 2 weeks." Vex Thrawn's mandibles spread wider. "Fascinating. And what was your mission objective, Lieutenant?" Emma considered her options. She was completely blown, surrounded by alien military cadets, and facing a commander who seemed more amused than alarmed by her presence. On the other hand, she'd already learned everything she'd come here to find out, and honestly, these people deserved some credit for actually figuring out her cover. "Intelligence gathering," she said finally. "We wanted to know how other species perceived humans, what your threat assessment protocols looked like, and whether there were any significant security vulnerabilities in the Galactic Academy system." "And your conclusions?" Emma looked around the room at the terrified faces. "Well, you're definitely taking us seriously as a potential threat, which is flattering, I guess. Your security protocols are pretty solid, though you might want to work on your student verification systems. And honestly, most of your threat assessment is surprisingly accurate." She paused, then grinned. "Though I have to say, the bit about smilin' being a threat display is hilarious. We smile when we're happy, when we're being polite, when we're trying not to laugh, when we're nervous, when we're lying, when we're telling the truth, and sometimes just because we feel like it." Poor Blex Tony, who had managed to climb back into his seat, raised a trembling hand. "So, when you were smiling at me during mess hall conversations, you weren't planning to attack me?" "Oh, heavens no," Emma laughed, and half the room flinched at the sound. "I was smiling because you were telling funny stories about your home planet. Humans smile when we're enjoying ourselves." "But the teeth," squeaked a Rigelian from the back row. "You were showing teeth." "That's just how our faces work," Emma explained patiently. "Look, Watch this. She demonstrated several different types of smiles, explaining each one. Happy smile, polite smile, amused smile, awkward smile, and yes, okay, this one is actually threatening. But we call it a snarl, and it's pretty obviously different from the others. Commander Vex Thrawn watched this impromptu lesson with obvious fascination. Lieutenant, would you be willing to participate in a practical exercise? Emma raised an eyebrow. What kind of practical exercise? The kind where we test whether our cadets can actually apply what they've learned about human behavior patterns. Oh, this was definitely a trap of some kind. Emma could feel it in her bones, but she was also genuinely curious about what he had in mind, and besides, she was already in about as much trouble as it was possible to be in. Sure, she said. What do you want me to do? Vex Thrawn activated his holographic display system. I'm going to present you with a series of scenarios. Your job is to react naturally. The cadet's job is to predict your responses based on what they've learned about human psychology. The first scenario materialized in the air above them. Emma was apparently standing on the observation deck of a starship, looking out at a beautiful nebula. Scenario 1, Vex Thrawn announced. You are alone on a ship's observation deck. You notice that the beautiful view in front of you contains something unusual. What do? Emma studied the hologram carefully. There, almost hidden in the swirling gas clouds, was what looked like a derelict spacecraft. Well, she said thoughtfully, first I'd take pictures, because it's genuinely beautiful, and I'd want to remember it. Then I'd call the bridge to report the derelict ship, because it might need assistance, or could be a navigation hazard. Then I'd probably go down to the science lab to see if anyone wanted to take detailed sensor readings. A murmur ran through the crowd. Kip Mora raised one of her 4 arms. Sir, she didn't immediately assume it was a trap or a threat. She wanted to help and learn from it. Exactly. Vex Thrawn nodded approvingly. Humans' first instinct is usually curiosity, not suspicion. Next scenario. The hologram shifted to show Emma in what appeared to be a combat situation, pinned down behind cover with several alien allies. You are outnumbered 3-1, low on ammunition, and your allies are injured. What do? Emma considered this. Check on my teammates first. Make sure their injuries aren't immediately life-threatening. Assess our tactical situation, available resources, and possible escape routes. If retreat isn't viable, look for ways to even the odds, maybe by using the environment to our advantage or finding a way to divide the enemy forces. She paused, thinking. Actually, in that exact situation, I'd probably try to draw their fire away from my injured teammates, maybe by making myself a more obvious target. The lecture hall erupted in concerned chittering. See? Vex Thrawn said triumphantly. Pack protection behavior. The human's immediate response to danger is to shield others, even at personal cost. Flex Tony leaned forward in his seat. But that's completely irrational. You'd be risking your own survival. Emma looked at him with genuine surprise. Of course I would. They're my team. That's what you do for people you care about. The third scenario showed Emma in what appeared to be a diplomatic meeting with several hostile-looking aliens. You are representing your species in peace negotiations. The other side has just made demands that you know your government will never accept. How do you respond? Emma studied the scenario carefully. I'd acknowledge their position respectfully, explain why those specific terms would be problematic from our perspective, and try to find common ground. Maybe suggest a recess so both sides can consider alternative approaches. She tilted her head thoughtfully. Of course, I'd Also, be paying attention to their body language, tone of voice, and any other behavioral cues that might give me insight into their real priorities. Are they genuinely committed to these demands, or are they opening with an extreme position expecting to negotiate down? And if you determined they were being deliberately unreasonable? Vexthron prompted. Emma shrugged. I'd still try to find a peaceful solution. But I'd also make sure my government knew exactly what we were dealing with. A Centaurian cadet raised an appendage nervously. What if they threatened to attack your homeworld? Emma's expression shifted subtly, and every alien in the room suddenly sat up straighter. It was like watching a house cat transform into a tiger. Well, she said, in a perfectly pleasant tone that somehow made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Then we'd have a completely different kind of conversation. The silence that followed was profound and deeply unsettling. And there, Vexthron announced cheerfully, we see the human transition from diplomatic mode to threat assessment mode. Notice how her posture, facial expression, and vocal patterns all shifted simultaneously. Emma blinked, and just like that, she was back to her normal, friendly demeanor. Sorry about that. Hypothetical threats to Earth tend to trigger some pretty deep programming. The fourth scenario materialized. Emma apparently working alone in a science laboratory late at night. You are conducting important research. You discover something that could revolutionize your field, but sharing it could also be dangerous in the wrong hands. What do? Emma considered this carefully. Document everything thoroughly, including the potential risks and safeguards. Consult with trusted colleagues who have the expertise to understand the implications. Develop security protocols for the information. She paused, looking troubled. If it's genuinely dangerous, I might recommend limiting access until we can establish proper oversight. But I wouldn't suppress the research entirely. Knowledge itself isn't evil. It's what people do with it that matters. Even if releasing this information could lead to weapons development, Vexthron pressed. Every major scientific advancement has potential military applications, Emma replied. Fire can burn down cities or provide warmth and light. Nuclear physics gave us both power plants and bombs. Medical research that saves lives can also create biological weapons. You can't stop progress, but you can try to guide it responsibly. A Carathian cadet clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. That's remarkably mature for a species you described as naturally curious and aggressive. Emma laughed, and this time only about half the room flinched. We've had a lot of practice making catastrophically bad decisions and learning from them. It's one of our more endearing qualities. For the final scenario, the hologram showed Emma surrounded by a group of young alien beings who appeared to be lost and frightened. You encounter a group of juvenile aliens from a species you've never seen before. They appear to be in distress, but you can't communicate with them and don't know if they might be dangerous. What do? This one didn't require any thought at all. Try to help them, obviously. Use universal gestures. Try to figure out what's wrong. See if I can get them somewhere safe. Even though they might be dangerous? Emma looked at him like he'd asked if water was wet. They're children. Of course I'd help them. The entire lecture hall went dead silent again. Emma looked around in confusion. What? Was that wrong somehow? Vexthron's mandibles were clicking rapidly now, which she'd learned usually meant he was either very amused or very thoughtful. Class, you've just witnessed the most dangerous aspect of human psychology. Emma frowned. Helping lost children is dangerous. To us, yes, he replied solemnly. Because now every being in this room would trust you with their offspring. You've just demonstrated the human pack bonding behavior that makes your species simultaneously the greatest threat and the most valuable ally in the galaxy. Emma looked around the room again. The expressions had shifted from fear to something else, something warmer and more complex. "Huh," she said thoughtfully. "I guess I can see how that would be effective." Commander Vex Throne deactivated the holographic display and turned to face his cadets. Lessons learned today. Humans are indeed extremely dangerous, but not in the ways we initially expected. They're dangerous because they make you care about them. They're dangerous because they care about you in return. They're dangerous because once they've decided you're part of their pack, they'll follow you into hell itself. He paused, looking directly at Emma. They're also dangerous because they're absolutely terrible at staying undercover when someone asks them direct questions about their species. Emma grinned sheepishly. "Yeah, that's definitely a design flaw. We're working on it." "No," Vex Throne said firmly, "don't work on it. The galaxy is a better place when humans can't help but be themselves." He turned back to his cadets. "Class dismissed. Your assignment for next session is to write a report on human behavior patterns based on today's practical demonstration. Lieutenant Vasquez, please remain behind." As 200 alien cadets filed out of the lecture hall, chattering excitedly among themselves, Emma found herself alone with the commander. She expected a lecture or an arrest, or at least some serious questions about her mission. Instead, Vex Throne asked, "How's the food in the cadet mess hall?" Emma blinked in surprise. Terrible. Why?" His mandibles spread in that unsettling Corathian smile. "Good. That means you're getting the authentic Academy experience. Lieutenant, I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "Your mission was intelligence gathering, correct? Understanding how other species perceive humans and assess them as potential threats or allies?" Emma nodded cautiously. "Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. You've learned that we take humans very seriously indeed. We study your species, we develop protocols for dealing with you, and we've built entire training programs around the assumption that humans will eventually become either our greatest enemies or our closest friends." He gestured to the empty lecture hall. "But here's what you didn't expect to learn. We're hoping very much that it turns out to be the latter." Emma felt a warm glow of something that might have been hope. "Really? Really? The galaxy is full of species that are stronger than us, smarter than us, or more numerous than us. But humans are the only species we've encountered that consistently chooses to be better than they have to be. That's rarer and more valuable than you might think." Vex Throne moved toward the exit, then paused. "Oh, and Lieutenant? When you submit your intelligence report, you might want to mention that the Academy would be very interested in establishing a formal cultural exchange program. We could learn a lot from each other." Emma watched him leave, then looked around the empty lecture hall. 3 months of careful infiltration, blown by the simple act of raising her hand to ask a question. She pulled out her communication device to contact her superiors, then hesitated. "How exactly do you explain in an official report that you accidentally became friends with the people you were supposed to be spying on?" She thought about Blex Tony's terrible jokes, Kip Mora's homesickness, and Commander Vex Thrawn's genuine desire to understand humanity. She thought about 200 alien cadets who had gone from being terrified of humans to being genuinely curious about them. Maybe, Emma thought as she began composing her report, the best intelligence operations were the ones where everybody won in the end. Outside the lecture hall, She could hear the excited chatter of cadets discussing everything they'd learned. Someone was arguing about human dietary preferences. Someone else was trying to figure out the difference between a threat smile and a happy smile. Emma smiled to herself, a genuine expression of contentment that no alien would ever mistake for a threat display, and started walking toward the communications center. She had a feeling this was going to be a very interesting report to write.